Sa mga bundok ng Hilaga, may mga kwento na matagal nang itinatagong lihim, mga alamat na binabalot ng takot at hiwaga. Isa sa mga kwentong iyon ay ang tungkol sa isang binatang naglakbay sa kabundukan, ngunit hindi niya alam na ang gabing iyon ay magiging simula ng isang engkwentro na magbabago ng kanyang buhay magpakailanman. Si Marco, isang binatang mahilig maglakbay at magsaliksik ng mga lugar na hindi pa nasusubukan ng ibang tao, ay nakatagpo ng isang matandang alamat na ipinasa sa kanya ng kanyang lola. Ayon sa alamat, may isang aswang na matagal nang naninirahan sa kabundukan, isang nilalang na hindi basta-basta makita ng mga tao. Si Marco, sa kabila ng mga babala, ay nagdesisyong sundan ang landas patungo sa bundok na matagal nang itinuturing na lugar ng mga hindi maipaliwanag na pangyayari. Kasama ang ilang mga kaibigan, naglakbay si Marco sa madilim na kabubatan. Hindi nila alam na may isang nilalang na mas malakas at mas matalino sa kanila ang nagmamasid sa kanilang bawat galaw. Habang binabaybay nila ang madilim na kagubatan, isang kakaibang pakiramdam ang dumapo sa kanilang mga katawan, ang pakiramdam ng hindi nila kayang makaligtas sa anuman na nagtatago sa dilim. Hindi nagtagal, napansin nila ang mga kakaibang senyales, mga palatandaan na nagpakita ng presensya ng isang bagay na hindi nila kayang ipaliwanag. Sa isang lugar na walang ibang tao, nakita nila ang isang nilalang na may mahahabang pangil at matalim na mga mata na kumikislap sa dilim. Si Marco, na nag-iisip na baka ito ay isang panaginip lamang, ay napatulala. Ngunit ang mga kaibigan niyang kasama ay nagsimulang manginig sa takot. Doon, sa madilim na kagubatan, nagsimulang mangyari ang mga hindi inaasahang bagay. Habang ang grupo ay tumuloy, nakaramdam sila ng malalakas na hangin, mga sirit ng kahoy, at mga tunog na hindi maipaliwanag. Ang isang nilalang na hindi nila nakikita ay tila malapit na. Sa isang iglap, narinig nila ang isang malalim na boses na nagsabi, "Hindi kayo dapat nandito." Ang boses na iyon ay nagmula sa isang aswang, isang diyosa ng kamatayan at dilim na kilala sa mga kwento ng mga matatanda. Ang aswang ay isang nilalang na matagal nang naninirahan sa bundok, pinili niyang manatili sa mga kagubatan at ilog, nagmamasid sa mga hindi pinapayagan na pumasok sa kanyang teritoryo. Ang aswang na ito, ayon sa alamat, ay may kakayahang magtago sa likod ng mga anino at magdulot ng kalituhan sa mga manghihimasok. Siya ay hindi tulad ng ibang aswang na kilala sa mga kwento, siya ay isang diyosa ng kamatayan, at sinumang magtangkang magtaksil sa bundok ay maduduwal sa kanyang mga kamay. Habang ang grupo ay patuloy na naglalakad, naramdaman nila ang presensya ng isang hindi maipaliwanag na lakas. Isang kakaibang puwersa ang umaligid sa kanila, at sa isang iglap, naramdaman ni Marco na siya ay may isang bagay na sumusunod sa kanya. Nang lingunin niya, nakita niya ang mata ng aswang na sumisilip mula sa isang malaking puno. Ang mga mata ng nilalang ay naglalaman ng matinding puot at galit. Sa mga susunod na sandali, ang gabi ay nagiging mas magulo. Mabilis na nagbago ang lahat. Ang mga kaibigan ni Marco ay nagsimulang mawalan ng pag-asa, ngunit si Marco, na kahit natatakot, ay nagpumilit na makahanap ng paraan para makaligtas. Hindi siya handang sumuko sa dilim ng bundok. Ngunit ang aswang, na may hawak na misteryo sa kanyang mga kamay, ay hindi basta-basta papayag na maging malaya sila. Huwag palampasin ang susunod na bahagi ng kwentong ito. Ano ang mangyayari kay Marco at sa kanyang mga kaibigan? Magkakaroon ba sila ng pagkakataon na makalabas sa bundok, o ang aswang na ito ay magtatagumpay sa kanyang plano? Tutok lang, at maghihintay tayo sa susunod na kabanata ng kwento ng isang binatang nakahuli ng Diyosang Aswang sa bundok. Habang si Marco ay nagsisikap mag-isip ng paraan upang makaligtas, ang kanyang mga kaibigan ay nagsimulang manghina sa takot. Si Miguel, ang pinakamatapang sa grupo, ay tila naguguluhan. Marco, anong nangyayari? Hindi ba't iyon ang aswang na sinasabi ng lola mo? Tanong niya habang ang kanyang mga mata ay nagsisimulang maghanap ng anuman na makakamtan nilang proteksyon. Si Marco, kahit may takot sa kanyang puso, ay pilit na nag-iisip ng mga hakbang na maaari nilang gawin. Nais niyang maghanap ng paraan upang magtago o magsanib puwersa laban sa aswang, ngunit alam niyang hindi magiging madali ito. Si Marco ay hindi pwedeng magpatalo sa takot, dahil siya ang nagpasya na maglakbay sa bundok na ito at siya ang leader ng kanilang grupo. Kailangan niyang maghanap ng lakas sa kabila ng lahat ng ito. Ipinakita ni Marco ang isang matalim na kilos, tinanong ang grupo kung may dala silang anumang uri ng gamit na maaaring magamit laban sa aswang. Si Liza, isang kaibigan nilang babae, ay naglabas ng isang lumang krus na galing pa sa simbahan ng kanilang bayan. Baka makatulong ito, sabi niya, ang boses ay nanginginig ngunit may pag-asa. Ngunit hindi naging sapat ang krus. Ang aswang ay tila hindi naapektuhan, at patuloy na lumalapit sa kanila. Ang mga mata ng aswang ay kumikislap mula sa dilim, at naramdaman nila ang malamig na hangin na dumaan sa paligid nila. Si Marco ay halos mawalan ng lakas, ngunit nagpatuloy siya sa pag-iisip ng mga paraan upang makaligtas. Habang ang grupo ay naglalakad, ang madilim na kagubatan ay tila nagiging mas malupit. Naramdaman nila na parang ang bawat puno, bawat sanga ng kahoy, ay may mga mata na nagmamasid sa kanila. Ang mga tunog ng kalikasan ay nagiging kakaiba, ang hangin ay tila nagdadala ng mga hindi pwedeng ipaliwanag na huni, at ang mga anino sa paligid nila ay kumikilos ng tila may buhay. Parang ang buong bundok ay naging buhay, at si Marco ay nagsimulang magduda kung kaya nilang makalabas ng buhay. Ang hindi nila alam, si Alona, ang aswang na diyosa ng kamatayan at dilim, ay matagal nang naninirahan sa lugar na iyon. Siya ay hindi tulad ng ibang aswang na kilala sa mga kwento ng mga tao. Si Alona ay isang nilalang na may malalim na koneksyon sa bundok, isang espiritu na pinagmulan ng takot at paghihirap sa buong lugar. Ayon sa alamat na narinig ni Marco mula sa kanyang lola, si Alona ay isang diyosa na ginugol ang kanyang mga siglo sa paghahanap ng mga manghihimasok na magtangkang sirain ang kapayapaan ng kanyang teritoryo. Siya ay may mga kapangyarihan na hindi kayang labanan ng mga ordinaryong tao. Si Alona, na may malademonyong mga pangil at mahahabang kuko, ay may kakayahang kontrolin ang mga hayop at halaman sa paligid. Sa mga mata ng iba, isa siyang masamang nilalang na walang awa. Ngunit sa katotohanan, siya ay isang nilalang na ginugol ang mga taon sa paghahanap ng katarungan. Ang kanyang kwento ay nagmula sa isang panahon ng kasaysayan, kung saan siya ay isang diyosa ng kabubatan na nasaktan ng mga tao. Dahil dito, nagbago ang kanyang puso, at naging isang aswang na may kakayahang pumatay at maghasik ng takot sa mga naglalakbay sa kanyang teritoryo. Habang ang grupo ay patuloy na naglalakad, ang mga kakaibang senyales ay patuloy na nagpapakita sa kanila. Si Marco at ang kanyang mga kaibigan ay nagsimulang mawala ng pag-asa, at ang mga tunog ng kagubatan ay naging mas nakakabingi. Parang bawat tunog ay nagsasabing malapit na ang kanilang pagtatapos. Ngunit si Marco, bagaman puno ng takot, ay hindi sumuko. Alam niyang may dahilan kung bakit siya naroroon at kailangan niyang makarating sa huling bahagi ng bundok. Sa isang mabilis na galaw, may isang malakas na tunog na umabot mula sa kabubatan. Ang lahat ay napahinto, at ang mga mata nila ay naghanap ng pinagmulan ng tunog. Ang mga sanga ng puno ay naggalaw, at isang dilim na anino ang dumapo sa harapan nila. Hindi nila ito nakikita ng buo, ngunit naramdaman nila ang presensya ng isang malupit na nilalang. Nagkatinginan ang grupo. Ang takot ay mas lumalim at si Marco ay nagsimulang mag-isip. Kung hindi sila kikilos ngayon, wala silang pagkakataon na makaligtas. Ngunit alam niyang ang aswang ay may mga lihim na hindi pa nila natutuklasan. Isang tanong na nagsisilibing hampas sa kanyang isipan, ano ba talaga ang layunin ni Alona sa kanila? Bakit sila pinili niyang habulin? Ang mga tanong na ito ay nagbigay sa kanya ng higit pang pagdududa, ngunit walang oras para magdalawang isip. Bago pa sila makapaghanda, isang malupit na tinig mula sa dilim ang umabot sa kanilang mga tainga. Hindi kayo makakaligtas, banta ng boses na iyon, at nagsimulang gumalaw ang mga anino sa paligid nila. Ang lahat ay nagtakbuhan, ngunit ang madilim na bundok ay tila hindi natutukoy na kaligtasan. Habang tumatakbo ang grupo, ang mga tunog ng kanilang mga yapak ay mabilis na nilulunod ng malalakas na huni ng mga hayop sa kabubatan. Ang hangin ay tila gumugulong, may dalang mabangis na amoy ng kahoy at lupa, at ang mga sanga ng puno ay tumatalbog na parang may buhay. Hindi nila alam kung saan patungo, basta't ang tanging layunin nila ay makalayo mula sa presensya ng nilalang na sumusunod sa kanila. Sa bawat hakbang na ginawa ni Marco at ng kanyang mga kaibigan, ang takot ay patuloy na lumalala. Wala silang alam kung may pupuntahan ba sila, o kung ang bundok na kanilang tinahak ay isang patibong mula sa simula. Si Miguel, ang pinakamatapang sa grupo, ay nagsimulang mawalan ng lakas. Marco, hindi ko na kaya, ang tinig ni Miguel ay nanginginig. Ang kanyang katawan ay puno ng kalasingan ng takot. Tinutugis tayo ng aswang. Tinutukso tayo ng mga anino. Hindi tayo makakaligtas dito. Sinubukang magbigay ng lakas si Marco. Miguel, hindi tayo titigil. Kung huminto tayo, mas malaki ang tsansa na mawala tayo. Kailangan natin maghanap ng paraan. Ngunit ang pananalig ni Marco ay nagsimulang mag-alinlangan. Habang tumatakbo, naramdaman niya ang patuloy na presensya ng aswang, parang sumisipsip ng enerhiya mula sa kanyang katawan. May mga pagkakataong ang kanyang mga paa ay hindi tumatalima sa kanya, ang hangin ay tila pumipigil sa kanyang dalaw, at ang mga anino ng kabubatan ay nagsisimulang magtago ng mga hindi makitang nilalang. Ang isang bahagi ng kanyang isipan ay nagsasabing subukan pa nila, habang ang isang bahagi naman ay nagsasabing ang lahat ng ito ay isang walang katapusang laro na hindi nila kayang tapusin. Ngunit bago pa siya makapagdesisyon, si Liza, na natatakot ding magpatuloy, ay napahagulgol. Marco, saan tayo pupunta? Hindi ba't ang aswang na yon ay hindi matitinag ng kahit anong gamit natin? Tanong ni Liza, ang boses ay punong-puno ng panghihina. Hindi kayang sagutin ni Marco ang tanong na yon, kaya't nagpatuloy na lang siya sa pagtulak sa kanila. Si Liza ay tumahimik at sumunod, ngunit ang bawat hakbang na ginagawa nila ay naging mas mabigat. Ang kagubatan ay tila nagiging mas makapal, at ang mga tunog ng mga hayop ay naging malupit at nakakatakot. Ang mga puno ay parang nagsisilbing mga bantay na nagmamasid sa bawat hakbang nila. Sa mga sandaling iyon, nagkaroon ng isang malupit na sagupaan sa isipan ni Marco. Pati siya ay naguguluhan kung dapat bang ituloy nila ang kanilang pagtakbo o maghanap ng ibang paraan. Alam niyang may mga misteryo sa bundok, pero hindi niya alam kung paano ito maiwasan. Isang tanong na patuloy na umuukit sa kanyang isipan, bakit sila pinili ng aswang? May mas malalim bang dahilan sa lahat ng ito? Habang nag-iisip siya, isang malupit na sigaw mula sa dilim ang umabot sa kanilang mga tainga. Makinig kayo sa akin, boses ng aswang, at ang tunog nito ay parang umaabot sa bawat sulok ng kabubatan. Ang bundok na ito ay hindi para sa mga tao. Ang mga katulad ninyo ay nagsisira sa kalikasan. Magtago man kayo o tumakas, ang aking galit ay hindi matitinag. Nagdilim ang kalangitan, at ang mga anino ay mas lalong nagiging malupit at nakakabingi. Si Marco ay napatigil, at napansin niyang ang kanyang mga kaibigan ay nawalan ng pag-asa. Si Miguel ay hindi na kayang tumakbo, at si Liza ay hindi na makalakad ng buo. Ang takot na nararamdaman nila ay unti-unting nagiging pisikal na sakit. Isang matalim na tunog mula sa likuran nila ang nagpabalik sa kanilang atensyon. Nagmadali silang tumingin at nakita nila ang isang malaking anino na lumalapit sa kanila. Isa itong nilalang na hindi maaaring maging ordinaryong hayop. Ang hugis nito ay parang isang malaking lalaki na may mga pangil at mahahabang pangil. Ang mata nito ay naglalaman ng dilim na tila kayang magpawala ng kanilang kaluluwa. Si Marco, bagaman natatakot, ay nagsikap na mag-isip ng solusyon. Tumigil siya saglit at nagbigay ng senyas sa kanyang mga kaibigan na sumunod sa kanya. Huwag kayong titigil. Tumakbo pa tayo, huwag tayong magpatalo. Ngunit sa bawat hakbang na kanilang ginawa, parang mas lumalapit ang aswang sa kanila. Ang mga anino ay tila nagiging buhay, at sa bawat galaw ng kabubatan, ang mga puno ay nagiging mga tanod ng dilim. Si Marco ay natatakot, ngunit mas natatakot siyang makita na mas mapahamak pa ang kanyang mga kaibigan. Ang hindi maipaliwanag na presensya ng aswang ay patuloy na nagpapahirap sa kanila. Ang lahat ng bagay sa paligid nila ay tila nagiging isang ilusyon, isang pagnanasa na laging humahabol sa kanila. Maya-maya, naramdaman nila ang isang kakaibang lakas na pumipigil sa kanilang pagtakbo. Isang malamig na hangin ang dumapo sa kanilang katawan, at sa likuran nila ay nagsimula na namang umabot ang tinig ng aswang. Hindi kayo makakaligtas. Huwag niyong isipin na may silbi pa ang pagtakas. Ang tensyon ay patuloy na lumalala, at si Marco ay nagsimulang mag-isip ng mas madilim na posibilidad. Kung hindi sila magtatagumpay, ano ang mangyayari sa kanila? Paano kung hindi nila makaligtas mula sa sumpa ng bundok? Ang hangin ay patuloy na humahampas sa kanilang mga katawan, at ang kabubatan ay tila nagsimula ng magbago. Ang mga puno ay nagiging mas mataas, at ang mga sanga ay nagsimulang magbukas at magsara na parang mga mata ng mga nilalang na nagmamasid. Si Marco, bagaman tinatangay ng takot, ay nagsikap na manatiling kalmado. Huwag kayong tumigil. Kailangan nating maghanap ng paraan, sinabi niya sa mga kaibigan, ang boses ay may pag-aalalang nakapaloob. Ngunit habang ang mga kaibigan ni Marco ay sumusunod, sila ay nagsimulang mawalan ng lakas. Ang bawat hakbang ay tila mabigat, at ang mga anino sa paligid nila ay nagpaparamdam ng isang matinding presensya, na parang may mga mata na sumusunod sa bawat galaw nila. Si Liza ay hindi na kayang magpatuloy. Marco, hindi ko na kaya, ang kanyang boses ay halos hindi marinig sa gitna ng kabuntot na katahimikan ng kabubatan. Ang takot sa kanyang mata ay nagbigay ng mensahe na hindi na siya kayang pilitin pa. Si Miguel, na kanina'y matapang at determinado, ay nagsimulang mawalan ng pag-asa. Ang mga paa niya ay hindi na umaabot sa lupa, at ang takot na dulot ng aswang ay tumagos sa kanyang kaluluwa. Hindi ko na kayang magtago, Marco. Mukhang walang pag-asa eh. Ang tinig ni Miguel ay basag, puno ng pagdududa at panghihina. Si Marco, na ang mga mata ay puno ng pag-aalala, ay nagsimulang maghanap ng paraan upang makaligtas. Habang ang mga anino ay unti-unting lumalapit, naramdaman niyang ang mga sanga ng kabubatan ay gumagalaw patungo sa kanila, parang mga kamay na naglalaban sa kanilang kaligtasan. Ang kanyang utak ay mabilis na nag-iisip, ngunit sa kabila ng lahat ng mga ideya, hindi niya matukoy kung ano ang tamang hakbang. Sa isang iglap, isang malupit na sigaw mula sa mga puno ang gumimbal sa kanila. Ang isang hugis na tila isang nilalang na walang katawan ay lumitaw mula sa likod ng malaking puno, at ang kanyang mga mata ay naglalaman ng nakakatakot na liwanag. Si Alona, ang aswang na diyosa ng kamatayan, ay tumayo sa harapan nila. Ang kanyang katawan ay halos hindi nakikita sa dilim, ngunit ang mga mata niya ay kumikislap sa isang asul na liwanag na waring naglalaman ng galit at paghihiganti. "Huwag kayong magtago," boses ni Alona. Ang tono ng kanyang salita ay matalim, parang binasag ang katahimikan ng kagubatan. "Ang oras ninyo ay dumating na." Ang mga anino sa paligid nila ay nagsimulang maglaro at magbago ng anyo. Ang bawat nilalang sa kabubatan ay parang nagbabalik loob kay Alona. Ang hangin ay malamig at ang kalikasan mismo ay nagsimulang magdulot ng sakit. Si Marco ay nagmamadaling tumingin sa mga kaibigan. "Huwag tayong titigil. Kailangan natin maghanap ng ligtas na lugar." Ngunit kahit siya ay nagsasalita ng may lakas, naramdaman niyang ang takot sa kanyang puso ay hindi na mapigilan. Si Liza ay napaupo sa lupa, ang kanyang mga mata ay puno ng takot at kalungkutan. "Marco, hindi ko na kaya. Ang aswang na ito ang lahat ng ito. Hindi natin kayang labanan siya." Ang kanyang tinig ay nagkakapanghinaan. Sa kabila ng lahat ng takot, si Marco ay nagpasya na hindi sumuko. Kung hindi sila kikilos, wala silang ibang pag-asa. Ang mga mata ni Marco ay nagliwanag ng determinasyon. "Tulad ng sinabi ko, hindi tayo pwedeng sumuko. Kailangan nating maghanap ng isang paraan." Si Miguel, na halos mawalan ng lakas, ay nagtaglay ng isang maliit na kristal mula sa kanyang bulsa. "Lola ko sabi niya may mga sinaunang puwersa sa bundok na maaaring makatulong. Kailangan lang natin magtiwala sa sinasabi ng mga kwento ng ating mga ninuno." Ang sinabi ni Miguel ay parang isang pangako sa dilim, ngunit si Marco ay nagsimulang magtiwala sa posibilidad. Pwede itong maging sagot, bulong niya sa sarili. Pero sa mga oras na iyon, ang kagubatan ay nagsimulang magbago pa, masyado ng malupit, at ang aswang ay hindi pa rin umaalis. Habang ang grupo ay patuloy na tumatakbo, ang hangin ay nagiging mas mabagsik. Ang mga tunog ng kagubatan ay lumalakas, ang mga anino ay hindi tumitigil sa pagsunod. Ang mga mata ni Alona ay sumisilip mula sa dilim, patuloy na nagsusuri sa bawat galaw ng grupo. "Bakit niyo ako nilalapastangan?" tanong ni Alona, ang boses niya ay malalim at puno ng galit. "Ang kagubatan ay aking tahanan. Hindi niyo kayang sirain ang aking mundo." Si Marco ay nag-isip ng mabilis. Ang kristal ni Miguel, ano kaya ang ibig nitong sabihin? Ang mga kwento ng kanilang mga lolo't lola tungkol sa mga sinaunang puwersa at mga nilalang sa bundok ay may katotohanan kaya. Bawat hakbang na kanilang tinatahak ay nagiging mas mahirap, at sa bawat sulyap sa likod nila, ang mga anino ng kagubatan ay lalapit. Ang mga mata ni Alona ay naglalaman ng labis na galit, at ang hangin ay nagsimulang humapdi. Si Marco ay nagsimulang magtakda ng plano. "Kailangan natin magsanib puwersa at gamitin ang lahat ng alam natin. Huwag tayong magpapanik." Ang kanyang boses ay tila nagsisilibing huling sigaw ng pag-asa. Ngunit alam niya, kahit anong gawin nila, ang aswang na ito ay patuloy na magiging malupit at mapanganib. Sa huling sandali, bago nila maramdaman ang mga kamay ng kagubatan na muling umaabot sa kanila, si Marco ay lumingon kay Alona, at sa isang matapang na tinig, sinabi niya, "Hindi namin hahayaang patagilid ang aming pag-asa. Hindi kami susuko at hindi mo kami matatalo." Marco's defiant words echoed through the tense silence of the forest, but the response from Alona was anything but what he expected. The air grew heavier, the shadows deeper, as the very earth beneath their feet seemed to shudder in response to her anger. Her eyes, glowing with an eerie, otherworldly light, locked onto Marco with an intensity that felt as though it could pierce straight through his soul. "You think you can defy me?" Alona's voice came as a chilling whisper, yet it carried the weight of 1,000 storms. Her presence, once ethereal and dark, seemed to expand, her form becoming clearer, an impossible vision of beauty and terror intertwined. "You are nothing but a speck in the world. I have waited centuries for this moment, and you dare challenge me." Marco's heart pounded in his chest. He wasn't sure how much longer he could keep his resolve. His legs felt like lead, his breath coming in shallow gasps. But he couldn't back down. Not now. Not with his friends depending on him. He clenched his fists, trying to steady himself. But then, something unexpected happened. The deep, resonating growl shattered the stillness of the forest. It was not the growl of any animal Marco had heard before, it was darker, more guttural, almost human. It came from the shadows, from behind the trees. And then, emerging from the dark, was a massive figure, its body cloaked in a veil of shadows. Its eyes glowed red, more like burning embers than living things. The air seemed to pulse with malevolence as the creature stepped forward, dwarfing the group in size and power. "Alona," the creature said in a voice that rumbled like distant thunder. "Enough." Marco and his friends froze, completely caught off guard by this new, monstrous presence. The figure before them was something they could never have anticipated. It was an enormous beast, part man, part animal, with long, jagged claws and fangs that dripped with malice. Yet, despite its terrifying appearance, it wasn't attacking. It stood in front of Alona, its sheer size and power demanding attention. Alona, too, seemed surprised by the appearance of this creature. Her eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a sneer. "You dare show yourself now, after everything," she hissed. "Do you think your presence will protect them?" The creature stepped closer, its heavy footfalls echoing through the forest. Its gaze shifted from Alona to Marco and his friends, and for a moment, the air seemed to hold its breath. "This is not their fight, Alona," the creature growled. "This is yours." Marco's mind raced as he tried to process what was happening. Who or what was this beast? And why had it intervened? It was clear that Alona, despite her immense power, was not in control of this situation. There was something else going on, something deeper than what they had originally understood. Liza, still trembling, whispered, What is that thing?" Miguel, whose eyes were wide with disbelief, could barely speak. "I don't know, but I don't like it, eh?" The creature's massive eyes shifted back to Alona. "The time has come to face your past," it rumbled. "You can no longer hide from the truth of what you've become." Alona's expression darkened, her lips pulling into a tight line. "You have no right to judge me," she snapped, her voice laced with venom. "You are nothing but a shadow of what you once were, just like them." The tension between them was palpable, an invisible force crackling in the air. The ground beneath Marco's feet seemed to tremble slightly, as if the very world around them was holding its breath. What was going on between these two ancient beings? And why was Marco caught in the middle of it? Before he could even gather his thoughts, the creature lunged toward Alona with incredible speed. Its claws slashed through the air, but Alona was quick to retaliate, her form shifting like smoke, vanishing into the shadows. The forest around them seemed to come alive, trees swaying violently as if caught in the midst of a powerful storm. The very earth seemed to be reacting to the violent clash between these two mighty forces. Marco stumbled backward, pulling his friends with him. "We need to get out of here," he shouted, panic rising in his chest. The fight between Alona and the creature was unlike anything he had ever seen. Beyond mere physical combat, it was an ancient battle, a clash of powers that had existed for eons. They were just pawns in a much bigger game. But as he tried to lead them away, the ground beneath his feet cracked, and a wave of dark energy swept across the clearing, knocking them all to the ground. The pain was immediate, the force of the energy almost unbearable. Marco struggled to rise, gasping for air. He looked around frantically for his friends. Miguel was the first to get to his feet. "Marco, we need to do something," he shouted, but his voice was barely audible over the chaos. Marco's mind raced. They had to get away from the fight. They couldn't survive if they stayed here. But as he looked up, he saw something that made his heart sink. Alona, her form twisted with rage, was now directly in front of them. Her eyes were glowing with fury, and her lips curled into a mocking smile. "You think you can escape?" Alona sneered. "You are nothing but ants in a path." Suddenly, a loud, deafening roar erupted from the creature, its massive form lunging toward them. But just as it seemed the battle would reach its climax, a flash of blinding light illuminated the clearing. Marco shielded his eyes, and when he opened them again, everything had changed. The creature and Alona were gone. The forest, once so alive with danger, was now eerily quiet. Marco's heart hammered in his chest as he tried to make sense of what had just happened. Had they truly disappeared, or had something else occurred? "Marco, what just happened?" Liza gasped, her voice trembling. Before he could respond, a new voice, soft yet unmistakably powerful, echoed through the trees. "The real test has only just begun." Marco's heart was still pounding in his chest, his mind racing to piece together what had just happened. The clearing around them was still, unnervingly still. The chaotic energy that had once filled the air seemed to have dissipated, leaving only an oppressive silence. The presence of the creature and Alona was gone, as though they had never existed. It was hard to believe. Had they won? Had the fight ended? Or was this just another trick, another cruel game from the forces that seemed to control everything around them? Liza, trembling beside him, grabbed his arm. "Marco, what happened? Where did they go? Where are they?" Marco looked around, trying to make sense of the eerie calm that had taken over. The forest, once so alive with danger and tension, now seemed almost too quiet. There was no sign of the terrifying figures that had once stalked them. It was as if the world itself was holding its breath. He could still feel the residual fear clinging to the air, but it was different now, more distant, like it was fading into the past. "I don't know," Marco said, his voice tight with uncertainty. "But I think they're gone." Miguel, still shaken, pushed himself up from the ground and wiped the dirt from his clothes. "Gone? Just like that?" His tone was full of disbelief, but even he couldn't ignore the strange stillness around them. "I don't trust this. Not after everything we've seen." Marco nodded. He didn't trust it either, but they had no choice but to move forward. We have to keep going. Whatever just happened, it's not over. We need to find out what's going on. As they gathered themselves and began moving cautiously through the forest, the sudden disappearance of their enemies didn't feel like victory, it felt like the calm before the storm. Marco's mind kept returning to the words the creature had spoken earlier, "The time has come to face your past." What did it mean? Was there something about him or his friends they still didn't understand? They continued walking, each step heavy with the weight of uncertainty. The moonlight filtered through the thick canopy of trees, casting eerie shadows on the ground. It was as though the forest itself was watching them, waiting for something to happen. Marco glanced back at his friends. Miguel was scanning the area nervously. Liza had her arms wrapped around herself, still shaken by the encounter. And he himself couldn't shake the feeling that they were being led into something much bigger than they realized. And then it came. A whisper. At first, Marco thought it was just the wind. But then it grew louder, sharper. A voice, faint but unmistakable, calling his name. Marco, he stopped in his tracks, his heart skipping a beat. The voice sounded familiar, but he couldn't place it. His breath caught in his throat. The others noticed his reaction. "What's wrong?" Liza asked, her voice full of concern. "Did you hear that?" Marco asked, his eyes darting around the clearing. He knew they couldn't be alone. Something was out there. Another whisper came, this time more insistent. "Marco, you don't know the truth." His blood ran cold. It was Alona's voice. "Don't listen to her," Miguel said, his voice trembling. "This is a trick. We can trust her." But Marco couldn't move. He felt as though the voice was calling him from somewhere deep inside the forest. He knew it was dangerous, but he felt an irresistible pull to follow. It's coming from over there," Marco muttered, pointing toward the dark, dense part of the forest. He didn't know why, but he knew he had to go. He had to know what this was about. Without waiting for the others to catch up, Marco began walking toward the darkness. Liza and Miguel exchanged worried looks, but they followed him, unable to leave him alone in this madness. As they ventured deeper into the heart of the forest, the trees grew tighter, their twisted branches weaving together like fingers locking in cold embrace. The air was thick with a sense of foreboding. Marco could feel it now, a growing pressure, as if the very forest was pressing in on them. Then, just as the tension reached its peak, the ground beneath them began to tremble. The trees shook violently, and from the depths of the forest, a massive figure emerged, Alona, but she was different now. Her form was more solid, her presence more overpowering than before. And standing beside her was the creature, no longer shadow, but a towering figure with eyes that burned with a fiery rage. "Marco," Alona's voice came, cold and malicious. "You still don't understand, do you? You were never meant to escape." Marco's breath caught in his throat as he finally realized what was happening. Alona wasn't just an Aswang, she was the guardian of something far more dangerous, far more ancient than he had imagined. She had been playing them all along, manipulating their every move. But the creature beside her, it wasn't just a servant or an ally. It was the key to everything. "Don't listen to her!" Miguel shouted, his voice shaking with fear. "Marco, we can trust them." Marco stood frozen, his mind racing to comprehend everything he was seeing. And then, with a sudden, horrifying realization, he understood the truth. The creature, the one that had seemed like an enemy, was not here to destroy them. It had been watching over them all along. It had never wanted to fight. In the blink of an eye, the creature lunged at Alona, its claws raking the air as it bellowed in rage. But before Marco could react, the entire world seemed to shift. The forest, the creatures, everything around them was no longer the same. The ground cracked open beneath their feet, revealing an ancient, forgotten temple, its walls adorned with symbols that Marco couldn't comprehend. Alona, her form twisting and distorting, looked at him with a twisted smile. "You were always part of this," she said. "This forest, these creatures, they are part of you, Marco. Your bloodline was destined to awaken this power." Suddenly, it all clicked. The truth, the reason they were here, the reason they were being tested, it was all connected to him. Marco wasn't just another victim of the Aswang curse. He was part of the ancient bloodline that had created it, and now, his true purpose was about to be revealed. But before Marco could react, the ground beneath him gave way, and everything went black. Marco's mind was a blur as he fell into the darkness. He felt weightless, as though the world had slipped away from him entirely. But then, suddenly, he hit solid ground, a jarring, painful impact that sent shockwaves through his body. His vision blurred, his head spinning, but slowly, as his senses returned, he realized he was no longer in the forest. He was somewhere deeper, beneath the earth, in a place that felt ancient and forgotten. The air was thick with the scent of damp stone, and the faintest echo of distant whispers floated through the space around him. As Marco struggled to rise, he felt a strange sense of calm settling over him. The fear that had gripped him moments ago seemed to fade, replaced by something else, a connection to this place, to the power that was hidden here. He stood up shakily, his hands pressing against the cool, jagged walls of what appeared to be an underground chamber. The flickering light from a distant torch illuminated the room, casting long shadows against the stone. And then he heard it, footsteps. Liza and Miguel appeared from the shadows, their faces pale and anxious, but they were alive. Marco exhaled in relief, but before he could speak, they were both looking at him with a mixture of confusion and awe. "What is this place?" Liza whispered, her voice barely audible. Marco shook his head, his mind racing. "I don't know, but I think this is where everything began. This is the heart of the curse, the source." The whispers that had echoed in the chamber grew louder, filling the space with an eerie intensity. Marco's heart pounded in his chest as he realized they weren't alone. Alona, the powerful Aswang, appeared from the shadows, her eyes glowing with an unnatural light. But she was different now, her form no longer twisted with rage, but instead calm, almost serene. She no longer seemed like an enemy, but something older. "You've finally come to understand," Alona said, her voice softer than before. "You are not just a victim, Marco. You are the key." Marco's chest tightened as he struggled to make sense of her words. "The key to what?" Alona stepped closer, her eyes locking onto his with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. "To the power that created this curse. To the truth of your bloodline. Your ancestors forged this connection to the Aswang, this dark power, and now, it is your responsibility to either release it or forever be bound to it." The weight of her words pressed down on Marco. For the first time, he understood the magnitude of what was at stake. He wasn't just some random person caught up in an ancient curse. He was part of it. His bloodline, his history, was tied to the very forces that had shaped the Aswang, the creature they had fought against for so long. Miguel stepped forward, his voice desperate. "No, Marco. You can't, this is madness. We need to escape, not embrace it." But Marco, deep down, felt the pull of destiny. He understood now that there was no escaping it. This was his fight, his legacy, and it was time to make a choice. He turned back to Alona, his voice steady despite the chaos in his heart. "What do I need to do?" Alona's lips curled into a faint, knowing smile. "You must make a sacrifice. The bloodline of your ancestors is bound to the curse of the Aswang. Only you are choosing to sever that connection can you stop the cycle. But it will come at a cost. The power that created the Aswang will either die with you or live on through you." Marco stood silent, his mind racing through the possibilities. The weight of the decision hung heavy in the air. The thought of destroying the curse, of ending the terror that had followed his family for generations, was tempting. But it wasn't just his life on the line. The very essence of who he was, his bloodline, his history, was bound to the fate of this curse. If he chose to sever the connection, he might erase everything, including his own identity. Liza stepped forward, her voice gentle but firm. "Marco, whatever you choose, we're with you. But you need to do what feels right for you. This isn't just about ending the curse, it's about you taking control of your own destiny." Marco looked at his friends, their unwavering support filling him with a sense of strength he hadn't known he had. He had always felt powerless, like a pawn in a game he didn't understand. But now, he realized that the power to change everything had always been within him. "I'll do it," he said, his voice firm. "I'll sever the connection." Alona nodded, her expression unreadable. "Then prepare yourself, Marco. The power of the Aswang is ancient and unforgiving. You must be ready to sacrifice everything." With a deep breath, Marco stepped forward, the whispers growing louder in his ears, his blood thrumming with the ancient energy that had been coursing through his family for generations. He extended his hand and Alona took it, her touch cold but steady. The ground beneath him seemed to tremble as the power of the curse began to awaken, its dark energy swirling around him. But just as Marco felt the immense weight of that power pressing in on him, something unexpected happened. Alona's form flickered, her eyes widening in surprise. "No. This wasn't supposed to happen." Suddenly, the ground split open, and the entire chamber shook. Marco's heart skipped a beat as he realized what was happening. The sacrifice wasn't just his own, it was a trap. Alona had deceived them all. She had been trying to use Marco's bloodline to strengthen her own power, to bind them all to the curse forever. With a scream, Marco pulled away from her, but it was too late. The dark energy exploded from the ground, engulfing the chamber in a blinding light. When the light finally faded, Marco opened his eyes to find himself standing in the forest once more. The creatures, the darkness, the power, they were all gone. The curse had been broken. He looked around at his friends, who were still with him, alive and safe. They had survived. But the journey had changed him. He wasn't the same person who had entered the forest. He had faced his past, his legacy, and had chosen to break free from it. As they walked away from the forest, the weight of the adventure lifted, but Marco knew this was just the beginning. There were still many mysteries left to unravel, and the world was much bigger than he had ever imagined. But for the first time, he felt free from the curse that had haunted his family for generations. The night was silent, but in that silence, there was peace. The world had changed, and so had Marco. The darkness had been vanquished, and with it, the story of the Aswang came to an end.